The war isn't over. 1 month after the fall of the Dominion was dead. Its homeworld Zalthar lay in ruins. Its supreme warlord, Zal-Zareth, was rotting in the dirt. Its war fleets had been shattered, its armies annihilated. Across the galaxy, former slave species celebrated their first taste of freedom in 10,000 years. But humanity was not celebrating. Because the war wasn't over, the hunt begins. Admiral Evelyn Kasari, 46, stood on the bridge of the Tyrant's Bane, her steel-gray eyes fixed on the war map before her. She was light-skinned, her dark brown hair streaked with silver, tied into a severe military bun. The scar above her left eyebrow was a constant reminder of the war that had taken everything from her. And it wasn't finished. Commander Daniel Roark stood beside her, arms crossed over his broad chest, his dirty blonde hair messy from weeks of relentless battle. His blue eyes flickered with that same dangerous excitement that made him a legend in the war. Kasari's gaze hardened as she pointed at the war map. 6 Dominion warlords are still out there. Roark smirked. Good. That means we still have work to do. The remnants of the Dominion. After the fall of their empire, Dominion survivors scattered across the galaxy, desperate to regroup and fight back. Admiral Veltrak, a former Dominion fleet commander, had taken control of a rogue battle group and was launching hit-and-run attacks on human-occupied space. Warlord Scarvul, one of Zal-Zareth's last loyal generals, had fled with an armored ground army, fortifying an ancient Dominion stronghold deep in the Outer Rim. The Hidden Legion, a rumored Black Ops force that had never surrendered, was planning something in the shadows. Humanity wasn't going to wait for them to strike first. They were going hunting. The first strike, Veltrak's last stand. Kasari's fleet tracked Admiral Veltrak's rogue battle group to the Veil Nebula, an eerie sector of space filled with dense ion storms and shattered asteroids. The coward thinks the storms will protect him, Roark muttered, gripping the edge of the tactical display. His rugged, scarred jawline tensed. He's wrong. Kasari's gray eyes narrowed. We're not fighting them in the open. We're luring them into a trap. The humans deployed decoy distress signals, mimicking the calls of vulnerable freighters. Veltrak took the bait. His fleet moved in, expecting easy prey. Instead, they found death. Kasari's fleet burst from the storm, their human-modified Dominion warships striking with precision. The Dominion forces panicked. For years they had terrorized others. Now they were the ones being slaughtered. Veltrak's flagship, the Blood Oath, attempted to flee. It never made it. Roark and his team infiltrated the ship, storming the bridge in brutal close combat. Roark, his combat armor smeared with Dominion blood, stood over Veltrak's broken body. The alien commander gasped, claws twitching. Roark leaned down, his blue eyes glinting. No surrender, no mercy, just like you taught us. And then he pulled the trigger. The message to the galaxy. Kasari sent a transmission to every remaining Dominion survivor. A hologram of Veltrak's dead body, slumped over his shattered command throne, flickered across the galaxy. Kasari's voice was calm, unyielding. 1 down, 5 to go. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The siege of Scarvul's fortress. The hunt continues. The galaxy was still bleeding. The Dominion had fallen, but its remnants still crawled like insects in the dark. Humanity was burning them out, one by one. But some were still dug in deep. One of them was Warlord Scarvul, a Dominion general so brutal that even his own kind had feared him, a warlord who had personally executed entire planets whose army of fanatical soldiers had never once surrendered. And he was still out there, hiding inside Fortress World Sirvan, an ancient Dominion stronghold, protected by impenetrable walls, planetary defense grids, and the last true Dominion warlords. Humanity wasn't going to wait. They were coming for him, and they were bringing hell with them. The human fleet arrives. The Tyrant's Bane, humanity's flagship, dropped out of hyperspace first, flanked by a fleet of human-controlled Dominion warships. Inside the bridge, Admiral Evelyn Kasari, 46, stood with her arms crossed, her sharp steel-gray eyes fixed on the holographic display of Shirvan. Her black and blue Earth Fleet uniform was crisp, but her body ached from months of war. She barely noticed. Commander Daniel Roark, 38, stood beside her, a cocky smirk on his rugged, scarred face. His dirty blonde hair was tousled, his blue eyes glinting with the thrill of the coming battle. His combat armor, scratched and worn, looked more natural on him than regular clothing. Kasari pointed at the fortress world hovering before them. There it is, the last stronghold of the Dominion. Roark grinned. Not for long. But even he knew this wasn't going to be easy. The fortress world of Shirvan. Shirvan wasn't just a planet. It was a fortress. Orbital defense platforms, each the size of a city, bristling with plasma cannons that could tear through entire fleets. Massive anti-aircraft guns embedded in the mountains, capable of shooting down dropships before they even reached the surface. A shield generator covering the entire capital city, making it impossible for humanity's warships to strike from orbit. An army of nearly 2 million Dominion soldiers, the last fanatics of a dead empire, waiting for the final battle. And at the heart of it all, Warlord Scarvul. Kasari's gray eyes narrowed. We do this in 3 phases. Phase 1. The fleet battle. Humanity had stolen Dominion technology, modifying it with their own brutal efficiency. Now it was time to use it. The battle began instantly as Dominion defense platforms opened fire, raining plasma beams across the void. Human warships weaved between the blasts, dodging through the asteroid belt surrounding the planet. Kasari stood tall on the bridge, barking orders with cold, deadly precision. Target their orbital platforms first. The Tyrant's Bane fired first. A single, massive railgun shot punched through a Dominion battle station, causing a chain reaction of explosions. More human warships surged forward, hijacked Dominion dreadnoughts returning fire against their former masters. The Dominion forces began to break. For the first time in history, they weren't the ones slaughtering. They were the ones dying. Phase 2, the ground invasion. Once the orbital defenses were shattered, it was time for the real battle. Roark led the first wave of dropships, his face grim and focused as they descended through the atmosphere. His squad sat around him, each one a battle-hardened veteran, their combat armor stained with the blood of 1,000 fights. 5 minutes to drop zone, the pilot shouted. Roark checked his stolen Dominion energy rifle, its barrel still scratched from the last battle. His scarred jaw clenched. He could already see the anti-air guns below tracking them. Then the first ship exploded. The air turned into fire. Evasive maneuvers. Roark barked. The pilot swerved as another ship was hit, spinning out of control. Human soldiers screamed as they burned. This was going to be messy. The battlefield turns into a bloodbath. Roark's dropship crashed hard into the surface. The doors slammed open and his team surged out, bullets and plasma fire ripping through the air. The Dominion forces were waiting for them. The first wave of humans barely made it out before getting cut down. Roark dove behind a fallen Dominion walker, his armor scorched from the landing. His blue eyes darted across the battlefield, taking in the carnage. Dominion soldiers charged forward, their massive reptilian bodies covered in black and red war armor, their razor-sharp claws dripping with blood. But the humans fought back. Roark's rifle snapped up, blasting a Dominion warrior in the chest, sending the alien crashing into the dirt. Another rushed him. Roark barely dodged, grabbing his combat knife and driving it into the alien's throat. Blood sprayed across his face. He grinned. This was war, and he loved it. Phase 3. The shield generator must fall. The battle raged for hours, turning the planet into a charred wasteland. But as long as the Dominion's planetary shield was up, Kasari couldn't send orbital strikes to finish the job. Roark, that shield needs to come down. Kasari's voice barked through the comms. Working on it, Roark growled, slamming a new power cell into his rifle. He and his strike team fought their way toward the shield control center, dodging heavy plasma fire. The shield generator was a massive tower, guarded by Dominion elites. Giants, nearly 10 feet tall, their black armor making them look like unstoppable war gods. Roark wiped blood from his mouth. Let's see how tough they really are. The final fight was brutal. Humans tore through Dominion elites, fighting inches away from death, their knives and rifles clashing against alien claws and blades. Roark personally shot the generator core, sending it into a chain reaction explosion. And in the sky, Kasari saw her chance. The final strike. From orbit, Kasari watched the shield fall. Her gray eyes were cold, unfeeling. Fire. The tyrant's bane unleashed a full-scale orbital bombardment. The Dominion city burned, towers collapsed, millions died screaming. The last Dominion stronghold was no more. Scarvel's last words. Roark dragged Warlord Scarvel's broken body onto the palace steps, blood pouring from his reptilian mouth. Scarvel spat at Roark's feet. "You think you've won?" the alien growled. "There is still one last weapon, one last hope for my kind. And you are already too late." Roark's blue eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." And he pulled the trigger. The last hope of the Dominion, 3 hours after the fall of Shirvan. The Dominion was dying. But before he died, Warlord Scarvel had spoken of a final weapon, a last desperate hope for his kind. And Admiral Evelyn Kasari, 46, did not believe in empty threats. She stood at the center of the Tyrant's Bane's war room, her steel-gray eyes locked on the burning ruins of Shirvan through the massive viewport. The Dominion's last stronghold was a smoldering wasteland, but deep inside her chest she felt a gnawing unease. Beside her, Commander Daniel Roark, 38, leaned against the holotable, his rugged, scarred face tight with thought. His dirty blonde hair was damp with sweat, his blue eyes flashing with sharp intensity. The words of the dead warlord echoed in his head. "One last weapon, one last hope, and you are already too late." A signal in the void, a deep alarm echoed through the war room. Kasari's head snapped toward the holographic war map, where a new signal had just flared to life, coming from the edge of Dominion space. The crew went silent. Roark's expression darkened. "That's not a distress signal. That's a beacon." Kasari's steel-gray eyes narrowed. "Patch it through." A transmission crackled to life, grainy, distorted, but undeniably alien. A voice hissed through the static, deep and reptilian, but with a sharp edge of desperation. "To any surviving Dominion warlords, the last hope remains. The legacy awakens. The void engine stirs." Then the transmission cut off. The void engine. The war room fell into a stunned silence. Roark's hands clenched into fists. What the hell is a void engine? Kasari's jaw tightened. She turned to her lead strategist, Colonel Hartman, a grizzled woman who had been studying Dominion war records for years. Hartman's face was pale with disbelief. "The void engine is supposed to be a myth." Kasari's gray eyes locked onto her. "Explain. Now." Hartman took a breath. The Dominion was not the first empire to rule the galaxy. Thousands of years before them, another civilization existed, the Vyrex. Roark frowned. "Never heard of them, because the Dominion erased them." Hartman's voice was grim. The Vyrex were their only true rival, a species of terrifying intellect and horrific cruelty. The Dominion waged war against them for nearly 500 years, but the Vyrex were obsessed with one thing: ascension. Kasari's hands clenched behind her back. "Artificial evolution." Hartman nodded. "They created something, a machine, the void engine, a device so powerful that it could rewrite biology at the molecular level, a way to forcibly evolve an entire species into something new." Roark exhaled, shaking his head. "That sounds like Dominion insanity." "Maybe." Hartman hesitated. "Except for one problem." Kasari's eyes hardened. "What problem?" Hartman swallowed. "The Dominion never destroyed it." The war room went cold. Kasari's heartbeat drummed in her ears. Hartman continued. "They tried. But before the war ended, the Vyrex vanished. The last records indicate that they sealed the void engine away, deep within the lost system of Vashrai." Kasari turned back to the holotable, staring at the beacon's coordinates. It was coming from Vashrai. Roark blew out a slow breath. "So what happens if the Dominion gets their hands on it?" Hartman's voice was grim. "Then the Dominion isn't just coming back. They're coming back as something else." "Race to Vashrai." Kasari didn't hesitate. She turned to her helmsman. "Plot a course for Vashrai. Maximum speed." The Tyrant's Bane and its fleet ripped into hyperspace, heading for the most dangerous location in the galaxy. Time was against them. If the Dominion reached the void engine first, then humanity had only fought the first phase of the war. Arrival at the lost system, the Tyrant's Bane dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of a dead system. Vashrai was nothing like the charts described. Instead of an abandoned graveyard, the system was very much alive. Massive ruins of an ancient civilization stretched across the darkened planets. Towers half consumed by time, monoliths covered in glowing alien glyphs. But the humans weren't alone. A Dominion fleet was already here. Hundreds of warlord-controlled ships, scavenged and repurposed, hovered in orbit over a single black planet at the system's core. Roark cursed under his breath. "We're late." Kasari's steel-gray eyes locked onto the planet's surface. The void engine was down there, and the Dominion was already trying to wake it up. She turned to her weapons officer. "Target their command ships. Fire everything." The final battle had begun. The Battle of HFY. The human fleet tore into the Dominion remnant, hijacked warships blasting through enemy lines. The void erupted in fire as orbital platforms collapsed, Dominion dreadnoughts exploding into debris. Kasari stood unshaken on the bridge, issuing orders with absolute precision. Roark's dropships raced toward the surface, cutting through the storm of debris. But even as they fought through Dominion resistance, Roark could feel something was wrong. The air crackled with energy. The ground hummed beneath his boots. And then, a low, alien whisper echoed through the battlefield. Something was waking up. Kasari's voice snapped through the comms. "Roark, what's happening down there?" Roark stared ahead, his blue eyes wide. The massive black pyramid in the center of the ruins began to glow. Alien glyphs flared to life, and from the darkness, something moved. Something not Dominion, something not human. Roark gritted his teeth, gripping his rifle. "We have a problem." The void engine was waking up, and it wasn't empty. The new enemy awakens HFY, the ruins of the Vyrex. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had known only two great powers, the Dominion and humanity. One had ruled through terror, the other had burned that empire to the ground, but neither had realized that they were never alone. Until now, the void engine had awakened, and so had the Vyrex. The ground team faces the impossible. Commander Daniel Roark, 38, stood frozen, gripping his rifle, as the black pyramid at the center of the ruins cracked open. The Dominion remnant forces, who had been fighting desperately against human ground troops, suddenly staggered back in fear. For the first time in history, Roark saw Dominion warriors drop their weapons and kneel. Not to surrender, to worship. A dark mist began pouring from the cracked pyramid, seeping into the battlefield, and then the Vyrex stepped into the light. Roark's breath caught in his throat. They weren't like the Dominion. They weren't like anything he had ever seen. They were tall, twisted, humanoid forms wrapped in shifting black exoskeletons, their skin pulsing with blue bioluminescent veins. Their faces were elongated, eyeless, their mouths split into razor-sharp mandibles that clicked as they moved. And when they looked at the battlefield, it wasn't with curiosity, it was with recognition. The Vyrex had been here before. They were returning home, and they weren't interested in coexistence. They were here to reclaim their throne. The battlefield turns to chaos. The Vyrex moved faster than anything Roark had ever seen. One lunged through the smoke, ripping into a Dominion soldier before he could even scream. Another melted into the darkness, reappearing behind a human marine, tearing his armor apart like paper. The Dominion tried to fight back, but their weapons barely slowed the creatures down. The humans opened fire, but the Vyrex dodged plasma bolts with unnatural reflexes, their bodies shifting like liquid metal to avoid fatal shots. One Vyrex snapped its arms outward, and its fingertips extended into bladed tendrils, slicing through 3 soldiers in a single movement. Roark clenched his jaw. "Fall back. Regroup at the landing zone. Now!" His squad didn't hesitate, but they weren't fast enough. The Vyrex were too fast. Roark turned just in time to see one of his men dragged into the mist, screaming. Another was lifted into the air by an unseen force, his body twisting as if something was rewriting his DNA. Roark emptied a full magazine into the creature, but it barely flinched, its exoskeleton absorbing the damage like water. This wasn't war. This was slaughter. The Vyrex's message above, the Tyrant's Bane, hovered in orbit, its guns lighting up the battlefield, but it wasn't making a difference. Admiral Evelyn Kasari, 46, stood on the bridge, her steel-gray eyes locked onto the shifting horror below. Her fleet had bombarded planets, shattered fortresses, and erased empires. But this was something else. Then, the comms went silent. A new signal hijacked their frequency. The holographic display flickered, and then a Vyrex appeared. It wasn't like the others. This one was larger, its bioluminescent veins glowing brighter, its exoskeleton forming into something almost humanoid, but twisted, elegant, deadly. And then for the first time it spoke. Not in words, in thoughts, directly into Kasari's mind. The Vyrex communicate, "You are parasites." Kasari's body went rigid, her head pounding. It was inside her mind. The Vyrex leader's voice was not a voice, it was a whisper, a sensation, an overwhelming tide of knowledge that was too much, too vast, too alien. She forced herself to stand tall. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice like steel. The Vyrex tilted its head as if amused. "We are the first. We are the last. We were gods before your kind learned to crawl, and now we awaken to reclaim what was stolen." Kasari clenched her fists. "The Dominion wiped you out." The Vyrex's mandibles curled into something almost like a smile. "They tried." Kasari's blood ran cold. "And now?" she asked. The Vyrex's voice echoed through her bones. "Now we wipe the slate clean. The Dominion, the humans, all will be rewritten. We are not here to conquer." Its glowing eyes locked onto hers. "We are here to evolve you." Roark's escape, and the ultimate decision. On the ground, Roark's team was outnumbered, outmatched, and running out of time. The Vyrex weren't just fighting them, they were taking them. Roark watched helplessly as soldiers were dragged into the mist, their bodies twisting, mutating, screaming. Then his comms flared to life. "Roark, pull your team back, now!" Kasari's voice was urgent. Roark gritted his teeth. "We don't have a way out." Kasari didn't hesitate. "I'm making one." From orbit, the Tyrant's Bane adjusted its trajectory, but not for bombardment, for a controlled crash. Kasari's fleet began descending, engines burning bright as they accelerated toward the surface. Roark's blue eyes widened. "Kasari, you're out of your damn mind. They want to rewrite us, Roark. That means they think they have time." Her voice was cold as steel. "We're not giving it to them." The human fleet tore through the sky, their ships slamming into the ruins at full speed, sacrificing themselves to collapse the Vyrex structures. Roark and his team ran as the ground collapsed behind them, massive explosions ripping through the battlefield. The Vyrex howled. For the first time they sounded angry. As Roark's dropship launched back into the sky, he saw the Black Pyramid shattering under the weight of the collapsing ruins. Maybe, just maybe, they had buried the threat before it could spread. The aftermath, a war reborn. Back on the Tyrant's Bane, Roark and Kasari stood in the war room staring at the wreckage below. "Do you think that was all of them?" Roark asked, his voice hoarse. Kasari didn't answer. She turned back to the war map, where the Vyrex ruins still pulsed faintly beneath the surface. No, her gray eyes were hard, unshaken. This was just their first breath. Roark exhaled, rubbing his face. "So what now?" Kasari's lips curled into something dark, cold. "Now?" Her gray eyes locked onto the stars. "We learn how to kill them.